You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM, and you join me here for Life Stories. Life Stories, as I always mention, really one of my favourite shows I get to do, just sharing with someone about their life, about their story, about their faith as well, and how that's come into their life and what impact it's made. And today I'm joined in the studio by Tom Collins. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Dave.
It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
It's a privilege.
It's something that I know you are both excited and a little bit apprehensive about sharing, but want to just really share your life and your faith testimony. So as I ask most people, I mean, your accent gives away that you're not a Janner born and raised, but
sure.
Tell me a bit about your upbringing, kind of where you were raised. What was life like for you in your early years?
Right, yeah, well, I was born just outside Wigan in Lancashire, as you might tell from my accent. My family, I have a brother who's 8 years older than me. My family, although they say they're Roman Catholic, I never went to church with my family, and it wasn't a religious family at all. It was just an ordinary little family, and at the age of 19, just nearly 20, I'd finished my apprenticeship with my father's company and joined the Royal Navy.
Nice. Was that a kind of career path that you'd wanted for a long time, or did that come about a bit spur of the moment?
Yeah, no, it was more or less spur of the moment. Like a lot of families, I think when you're a young teenager, you've kind of got that wanderlust that you want to get away from. Certainly get away from Wigan. It was a black, grimy place back in those days. And the Navy seemed a good thing to do. Plymouth seemed a long way from Wigan, so it was like going to another planet for me.
Yeah. So your days, of being in Plymouth go right back to then, from when you joined the Navy, you were posted here and all of that. So, the aspects of your life, we're going to talk about a lot of different things in this, but obviously the biggest aspect you really want to emphasize is kind of coming to faith. So we'll skip ahead various chapters in your life. Yeah. So you joined the Navy, kind of go through some of the years after that. You were single at that point. Did you find a life partner around then, or what happened to you there?
Yeah, when whilst I was still serving in the Navy, just before I joined what is now called the Service Police, I met Anne. I got married whilst I was still in the Navy, and I think it must have been maybe about a year or two after I'd been married, I decided to leave the Navy.
Right.
I think I what you would describe as a checkered career, really. Although I had a trade, I wanted to try something different. So I became a carpenter, and we both worked for the same company. That was the company that built the submarine complex that now is.
Right.
And then skipping forward a little bit, our marriage was... Yeah, a nice marriage. We loved to travel. We like mountains. We like walking on the mountains. We even went as far as Mount Everest, which was a wonderful experience.
How far did you get to kind of base camp? Did you get further?
We got a base camp.
Yeah.
We climbed a little peak near there called, I think it was called Kala Pattar. And that was 18,500 feet above sea level, yeah.
Wow. So in many ways, I suppose, with being in the Navy as well, quite an adventurous life, as you say, a bit of a wanderlust, wanting to travel, and that transferred into your marriage and your life with Anne, climbing mountains, all of that kind of stuff. So kind of a lot of, I guess, lust for life, just going for life, going for travel, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely,
in many ways.
Yeah.
We're going to stop for some music there, pick up the conversation, because obviously things took a pretty tragic turn that you talked about off air, that we're going to talk about after this with Tom. You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth, 96.3 FM, and online at crossrhythms.co.uk/Plymouth. I'm in conversation with Tom Collins for his Life Stories interview, for a Life Stories episode here. So if you've just joined us, you missed one section, but you'll be able to listen again on the website in full. So Tom, you've talked a bit about your upbringing, kind of in Wigan, wanting to travel, get away from Wigan. No slight on Wigan in that sense, but you just wanted to travel and see the world. Joined the Navy, and kind of soon after that got married to Anne. And you guys did quite a lot of travel. You said Mount Everest as well, which that's a conversation for a pub and a pint another time, I think. But what happened then? There was a kind of tragic way things took a course for you in that marriage. Yeah,
life changed, rather dramatically, really. Just prior to Anne feeling unwell, I had a terrible feeling of I don't know how I could express it. Something terrible about to happen, and it kind of affected my work, and I couldn't. When I saw a doctor, I couldn't explain, what this was. I just felt something terrible was going to happen. And I think it was the Christmas of '96 that Anne didn't feel well, and I had this feeling that the Christmas will never be the same again, and I didn't know why. And I think shortly after that, must have been about February, Anne was so ill that I had to call the doctor. And cut a long story short, so I'd take her up to Derriford and have a scan. So we took her to Derriford, and the scan showed that she had 4 brain tumours.
Wow.
And at the time they said, well, they may operate. And then on the next visit, when I was called into the doctor's room, and he said, we're not going to operate anymore. So I said, well, why is that? He said, well, she's got terminal cancer. She's got 6 months to live.
Gosh.
And I think the consultant that visited said something crazy like, go out and do all the things that you wanted to do, go hot air ballooning and things like that. Well, when you know that you're dying, I think that's one of the last things you want to do.
Yeah.
So really, life took on a completely different turn then.
Yeah.
So Anne, bless her, lived 9 months for the 6 months prognosis, and that period of time was it was quite a dark time, in my life. And
how did that leave? I mean, obviously tragic, devastating, any word for it, but how did it leave you feeling about your life going forward and kind of life for you, knowing that she wasn't going to live for that much longer?
Well, she died in St. Luke's, and I have to say that they were amazing people. And when she died, I just felt, I died. I just felt, what is my life going to be now? I couldn't see life without her. And, I don't know, after a period of deep mourning, I decided to go back into, get a motorcycle and go back into that life. I'd had a motorcycle in the past, but it wasn't a lifestyle, if you understand.
Sure.
But I felt, I was angry, I was quite a bitter, aggressive sort of person then, I'd become. And
just purely through the grief and through that whole,
yeah. And I suppose, when I got into biking, I met a bunch of guys, who in a way they kept me alive because they gave me a purpose to belong to this little gang, and we did, crazy stuff that I'm looking back, I'm not proud of, but it was stuff that gave me a a focus.
Yeah.
But it was the wrong focus.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's a good place to leave this section and pick up with Tom and talk more after this. You're listening to Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. I'm in conversation with Tom Collins. You'll be able to listen to this in full if you've just joined us on the website, crossrhythms.co.uk/Plymouth. We'll also put videos of this up on social media and YouTube as well. Search for Cross Rhythms Plymouth on there. But Tom, as ever, with any of these guests, I'm really grateful for you sharing this. Obviously, it's very, very personal for you. It's your life story. You talked in that last section about how your world totally changed, as anyone's would really, when your wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer and died 9 months later. And to pick up where you left off, you joined. Was it kind of an official motorcycle gang?
No. It was just a bunch of guys. I don't know. There must have been about 10, something like that.
Yeah.
And there were different people who used to join. Pop along.
Yeah.
Different week. On the weekend. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good times. I mean, there had to have been good times, otherwise I wouldn't have been doing it.
Yeah. But I suppose you said it gave you a sense of purpose in some ways. A sense of camaraderie, I suppose, a sense of relationships.
That is the word. Absolutely, yeah. And like a brotherhood.
Yeah, of course.
Like. Yeah.
And was that, you said you did some things you regretted without going into the detail. Was it kind of like criminality? Did it get that far into that?
It was just, I suppose, when you see these films of bikers causing trouble, it was that kind of thing. It was just like being big kids, really, with big motorcycles.
Yeah.
And doing stuff that wasn't strictly legal. Without going into too fine a detail, I used to smoke in those days, and sometimes smoke the stuff I shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, is going down the wrong path.
Yeah. And you talked about it a little bit off air, not in a great deal, that you no longer drink, you're a recovering alcoholic. Did alcohol get involved in your life then? Was it something that had come in before? Was that something that you guys turned to
as we say in AA, I've been in recovery for around 42 years.
Wow, yeah.
And Anne, bless her, about a week before she died, she made me promise her that I wouldn't drink after she died.
So drink was an issue long before Anne passed.
Yeah, okay. And I promised her. I made that promise. And I said, I won't. And I didn't drink. I didn't go back to drink.
Yeah.
But I didn't promise that I wouldn't
get into drugs and motorcycle gangs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so to pick up from where you were there, then I suppose when we talked off air, you were saying your life, despite the fact that gave you a sense of purpose and a sense of camaraderie, your life still felt quite meaningless and quite purposeless. Yeah. Did you feel under the surface still very much grieving, still quite depressed? Where were you at as a person as you kind of progressed through those years?
As I discovered later, I was literally locked in grief for a number of years, 13, 14 years. And it was during those years, my lifestyle, as I mentioned, had completely changed into, the lifestyle of living for bikes, living for the rides, living for the kicks, as they say. And apart from it being an exciting time, it was also a very dark time that I knew my life was going. Eventually, after 13 years, I knew my life was going down the wrong path. I knew that it wasn't going anywhere, and I just felt sick to death of my life. I thought, well, this is going nowhere, and I knew there was something else, but I just couldn't find what it was.
Yeah.
How could I get out of this?
Yeah.
And I got to be absolutely honest with you, I got to a very desperate point in my life where I felt I really didn't want to be here anymore, So I think, You know, a lot of people, most of us, even if we don't have any faith whatsoever, in times of desperation, will cry out to God and pray. And
as a kind of last-ditch effort, a kind of like well, everything else has failed, so maybe why not that kind of thing?
Yeah. And I earnestly prayed to a God I didn't know, you know, that either end me or mend me, you know, either take me away or change my life and bring my life to have some meaning, to bring someone into my life that I could identify with, be a friend and maybe a relationship, you know. But I certainly didn't want to stay in the life that I'd made for myself then. Everything was superficial life. It had no meaning.
Yeah. Really interesting. That's a perfect place to leave it for this section, and pick it up with Tom after this. You're listening to Life Stories here with Tom Collins. Thank you, Tom, for taking this time to share with us. And we're kind of quite a way through your life story already. Got to the point really where through grieving, or I suppose not grieving properly, being locked in grief at the death of your wife, and in a situation which I'm sure many people find themselves in when they lose someone. It's a very hard road to travel. No one has a guidebook for do all these things and it's going to work out. It's just horrible. You'd kind of built yourself a bit of a life, different life, involved in motorcycles, sort of motorcycle gang of a few guys and stuff, but a deep sense of I'm desperate, I want more for life. And I love that you said you prayed to a God essentially that you didn't really believe in, just to say, God, help me.
Absolutely.
And if possible, bring someone along to help me as well.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about that in your head, or at least, you know, maybe whether you verbalized it or not. You had a bit of a checklist for the ideal sort of person, that kind of thing.
I think it was in my mind, you know. I prayed when I can't remember exactly what I asked, but I desperately needed my life to change, to get out of this. It had become darkness, really, a bad place. And in my mind, I'd often think, well, I'd love to meet a person of the opposite sex, maybe a little bit younger than me, maybe a little bit shorter than me, and somebody that was honest and, you know, had high moral standards and didn't drink, because obviously being a recovering alcoholic, I wouldn't want them to drink. I wouldn't want them to smoke, because I'd stopped smoking and all of that stuff. Yeah, and I'd like them to like motorcycles, you know, and you could almost have this image in my head of God having a kind of a checklist on a board going, oh yeah, let me think, oh yeah, you want them to have to be honest, to like motorcycles. Would that be Harley Davidsons? Oh yes, please. You know. And the other thing was that big tall order would be for them to understand the pain of grief of losing the one you love.
Sure.
I thought that was a tall order, really. However, that was what was in my mind. I didn't verbalize it.
So you never really put in even, I suppose, didn't even have the hope that it would be a thing that happened. It's just kind of like a vague, that would be nice.
Like
but
a wish.
Yeah, exactly. It's not even as much as a prayer or even something you wrote down.
Absolutely no. It was a cry for help. Yeah. But I didn't really expect anything to happen.
But that was very real, and those things were very real on your heart of like,
Absolutely.
This is what would make a big difference to me. So tell us what happened.
Well, it must have been about a week or so after I said that prayer. I was sat on the Hoe. September, it was a lovely day, and I was sat on the wall. My Harley was parked up in the bike park, and I was looking out at the view, and I heard this other motorcycle coming down, and it was another Harley. And I watched it park up next to mine, and I thought that was neatly done. And the rider got off, still wearing a crash helmet. And I thought, oh, that's a young woman. And she took the crash helmet off, and as she was walking past me, I said, well, that was a bit of neat parking or something of that nature. And she stopped, and I said, you know, aren't we lucky to live here? Look at our view. You know, the view was looking out the hole, the sea was blue, and all the trees and the grass was green. And I said, you'd think that had been created, wouldn't you? Why on earth I said that, I don't know. But this lady replied and said, well, as a matter of fact, I know it's been created. I said, oh, really? So a conversation started around that, and I discovered in conversation that this lady, who was called Bronya, she didn't drink, she didn't smoke.
She turned up on a Harley, so that was a good start.
She turned up on a Harley, yeah. And I started to think, oh, this is a little bit spooky, this is a bit weird. And then she said she'd been bereaved and had lost her husband, Phil, for a couple of years it was at that time. And I thought, oh, and I felt, how has this woman got this kind of bubbly, positive personality where I had been grieving for 13 years and was, you know, an angry person in a way. And that was when, you know, I said, how did you, you know, how can you be like that? And she said, well, I was helped by, you know, a lot of friends. And I said, well, where was that? And she said, at church. Well, I remember having this sinking feeling. And she said, oh, church. Because I didn't really want anything to do with church or Bibles or that kind of religious, you know, all the rules and all of that. I just really, you know, didn't want to identify with that. But anyway, to just fast forward a little bit, she said, well, there is a course called an Alpha course. And I said, I don't want to go on any course with any Bible-punching Christians. She said, no. It's for people that are interested and want to know why and what it is that Christians have that other people don't.
So I suppose for you, your interest was piqued at the fact you'd prayed not long before, you know, wanted, without even praying it, this checklist of a person, of a lady to come into your life. She ticked all the boxes. And not only that, but the fact she had lost her husband and had something different about her. That gave you enough of a hook to go, actually, yes, I don't really want anything to do with what I believe Christianity is and church and stuff, but there's something here that I can't deny. Well, we're going to stop for music and we're going to talk with Tom about how this progressed for him after this. This is Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. I'm in conversation with Tom Collins, and I suppose we're getting to the focal point of where your life really changed, Tom. And you said in that last section how you'd met this lady, having just prayed a prayer of desperation, having no faith, not even believing in a God, but just being desperate. You said, mend me or send me in terms of, end me, sorry, in terms of like, you didn't really want to live. And if you wanted to live, you needed your life to change.
Absolutely.
And so at the same time, you had a lot of preconceived ideas as to what Christianity was. You didn't really want to be involved in church. But this lady came into your life in quite a remarkable set of circumstances, as you've described, that gave you enough reason to want to explore it. So she said about an Alpha course. You went along to the Alpha course. What happened for you from there?
I think it was the second week of the Alpha course. There was a book. I was given 2 books by 2 very, very good friends of mine, Malcolm and Enid Pope, who, after Anne died, they showed me a lot of kindness. They were Baptists, and I remember Malcolm trying to introduce me to faith at the time, but I wouldn't have any of that then. But 2 books they gave me. One was a book called Basic Christianity by John Stott, and the other was The Message. And the other one, there was 3, and the other one was Psalm 23.
Right.
To my shame, they stayed on the shelf for 13 years, and I never looked at them. But on the second week, I asked Bronnie, I said, look, I've got this little book here, Basic Christianity by John Stott. Do you think that's worth a read? And she said, oh yeah, without a doubt. On that second night, there was a little booklet you have on the Alpha course, and I opened the book, and in it said recommended reading, and one of the books was Basic Christianity by John Stott.
Yeah.
So I eagerly got into reading the book. The Alpha course, I found that was remarkable. I highly recommend that for people that are not sure about faith, as I was. I wasn't sure at all. But when I listened to this guy called Nicky Gumbel, who was previously a barrister, and I thought, well, if anyone can get to the truth, this guy can. And on this particular session, he used the Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes law of elimination to kind of talk about Jesus. Is he who he says he is? Excuse me. Well, apparently there was enough information, enough evidence that a man called Jesus lived in Nazareth at that time as a carpenter. But as Nicky said, is he who he says he is, the Son of God? So they said, well, he was either a madman or he was evil or is an imposter. So he looked at the evidence that he certainly wasn't mad, and he certainly wasn't evil because of all the good things that he'd done. And he certainly wasn't an imposter. And in the Sherlock Holmes law of elimination, it says, once you have removed the impossible, what remains, however improbable, and whether you like it or not, has to be the truth.
Right. Yeah.
So the improbable, the impossible had been removed. That left, Jesus had to be who he says he was.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, I've got nowhere to go here. This, so I went away thinking about this. And I didn't have a light bulb moment, but I knew a switch had been switched in my head that there was some substance in what he'd said. Yeah.
That's really good place to leave this section. We'll come back with the final section and discuss I suppose you said you didn't have a light bulb moment then, but you had quite a profound moment later, a little soon after that, which we'll talk about after this. This is Life Stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth. Final part of my interview with Tom Collins. It's been really great to speak with you, Tom, and we've kind of got to the point at which you've been convinced that there's substance to the Christian faith, substance to your previously, doubting, but also, no, that's really, really not for me perspective. Yeah. How did it become more than that for you, though? How did it become personal? Tell us about that moment for you.
Well, I knew there was something there, but again, I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't kind of totally grasp that. That answer. I didn't suddenly think, oh yeah, well that's the answer, I'll start going to church. It didn't happen that way. I started to read this book, Basic Christianity, and at the back of the book there is a little prayer, And the author says, if you really want your life to change and you want Jesus to come into your heart, then you have to ask him. Your life won't change otherwise. He won't burst into your life. You've got to ask him. You've got to want that. And the little prayer was along the lines of saying I was sorry, which I truly was, for all the wrongs that I'd done, and earnestly asking Jesus to come into my life. And I prayed that, and as I prayed and asked Jesus to come into my heart there and then, I started to tremble, started to shake, and tears were streaming down my face. And I felt there was something going on. And
you said off air, you said you were by yourself at this point.
I was by myself, yeah.
So it wasn't like someone else was convincing.
So I didn't have to prove anything to anybody. I was on my own. It was lunchtime at work, and I had my little radio playing in the background. And just, this is the incredible thing, is because God has a sense of humour. As I was shaking and tears coming down my face, thinking, well, something's happening here, the DJ said, and now we're going to play George Harrison, My Sweet Lord.
Wow.
And I thought, I laughed. There was tears coming down my face, and I laughed. And I thought, this something has happened.
Yeah.
Something... that I couldn't explain.
That's
supernatural,
awesome.
Spiritual.
And it suddenly went from being something you were against to something you could see value in, to then something deeply personal for you, and a point of, as Christians would say, a point of salvation for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've not got that much time. I'd love to chat with you much longer, but what's life looked for you since then? I know the relationship with Bronya developed. That's probably something you want to touch on, but how's it changed? How has your life changed as a result of that experience?
Well, shall I say that was the first step in a very, very exciting journey. When I came to faith, when I asked Jesus to come into my life, and I felt that happen, that was the process had begun for me to change. And Bronya, bless her, we've been married now for 6 years. I've known her all of those years, and she's been my spiritual guide. And even now that I go astray, that anger and that aggression is still there, but it is underneath, and I keep control of that, because, that is something I don't want to come out. But Bronya, bless her, she knows that, the kind of guy I am. So she guides me, and she taught me about forgiveness. And that's a whole other kind of book, really. On that journey, it's a wonderful journey, and you learn so much about how to be, how your life should be, and it's trying to follow those guidelines that Jesus gave us, by being submerged in that, by reading the Bible, which it is not a boring book. I discovered it's a great book, and it's very, very exciting. And it's a book that makes you need to study it. And you can't just pick it up and read a few pages of the Old Testament and go, oh, that's not for me. I stuck with it. I read it once right the way through as it's written, and then Bronya and I read it chronologically and studied every aspect of the Bible, and let me tell you, it was not boring. It opened up all kinds of wow moments as you're reading it. You think, wow, I can identify with that. Yeah, that it was written a long time ago, but what is written in that book is relevant to us all today. And it is. You would think it was written last week in a lot of situations, It isn't an old and dusty book that is boring. It is alive. And that changed my life, and my life from that point onwards. That and our marriage is a wonderful marriage. and we pray together. We do ministries together, like the soup run, prayer pastors, and that kind of stuff that we do at church. But it's, how can I put it? Apart from it being giving life a focus, I know it to be the right direction. I know it to be the right focus to have.
Yeah.
You know, and an old friend of mine that has since passed, president of an Hell's Angel club in Portsmouth, who later became a minister, wrote in his book, he said, if it wasn't true, if God wasn't a thing, why on earth would a man like me change my life from the life that it was to say, yeah, I now believe in Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
Why would I say that if it wasn't true?
Yeah. That's a perfect place to leave it, a perfect place to finish off our interview. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Wish you well. And as I say, if you've listened to this, you just joined us for like the last bits, check out our website, crossrhythms.co.uk/Plymouth. Check out our YouTube channel as well, where we'll have it available for listen again and to view as well. So tune in for more life stories here on Cross Rhythms Plymouth in future.